Samar, he's an artist who often uses photography and film to focus on marginalized issues and communities. Over the past 20 years, his work has been seen in galleries and museums worldwide, as well as on Discovery and National Geographic Channel. His 8-year-long photo project on aging in India remains the single biggest social communication project in terms of outputs and outreach as listed by Limca Book of World Records, Indian Records, I'm sorry. His recent show, Bhopal, a silent picture, toured 3 cities and was seen by 95,000 people. Parallel to his personal projects, Samar works on commercial assignments around the world. He is also a regular speaker at TEDx. Samar.
My purpose of this presentation is mostly for young people, because when I was, I picked up my first camera when I was 13, and I was confused. I think I'm still confused in some ways, but I was really not sure where I was going with it. And this presentation is really meant for people who have been in this profession for some time, or they're just starting off. A lot of my friends out here, they've seen my work for the last 20 years, where I started and whatever I'm doing today. My background was, my family was very different. We didn't come from any artist or any photography connection. My father is an economist, and he worked in about 20-odd countries. So I was at a very early stage. I was exposed to a lot of different parts of the world, especially the developing world. And then I went to a number of schools where I dropped out, or I failed, or I got thrown out, or whatever, including NID and a bunch of schools in the West. After finishing from my last school, which was actually not really finishing, but when I left that school, I got into one of these very big, high-end Harley Davidson. So once I got out of this, okay, is that good? Yeah. I got hold of. I wanted to work in a fashion car studio, which any young person wants to do when you come out of school. And I worked for one very hotshot studio in Boston and in New York, and all kinds of Harley Davidson catalogs and Timberland and fashion and all that stuff. But I had this big, huge thing about that. I want to go back, to India, and I want to actually work on some book, because we all want to have a book, I was very early. I was in my early 20s then. So I arrived here, and then I figured out that it's not that easy. You gotta have money, you need funds, and you need to know publishers and all that stuff. So I thought, let me go back to advertising, and that's when I met Prabhudo actually. He was off to, I think he was going to Paris for his YSL residency program or something like that. So he put me in touch with a couple of agencies, and that's where I started doing my advertising work. Not to forget that time, because I was doing a lot of cars in the West, so they hired me. I used to go and shoot in this Eagle studio in Noida, which was trying to be a film city or something at that time. But unfortunately, there were only 3 kind of cars here. So there was Maruti, and there was, of course, our good old Ambassador, and some Fiat. The Fiat account was mostly, I think, out of Bombay. So I used to do these car shoots. Models were not changing, but we kept shooting it every year, and it was good money. Then I thought, okay, now it's time to get into a book. I did collect a little bit of money, and I met a gentleman, Amannath, and I met India Book House, and we decided we're going to do a book on Jaipur. And this was in 1992, and it took me about 2 years or so to do that book. It was quite challenging, because the publisher didn't really have much clue on doing large format books. They were trying to break into the business. I was obviously trying to break into the, being a book photographer. And so anyway, we worked on this. It was a lot of going back and forth. It was first time we got into this whole concept of gatefold. But when I shot them on 4x5, and I had all these great formats. Film was very popular because a lot of people were processing it out here. And but the problem I had was when we did these were like panoramic 120 6x17 or something. we couldn't scan those films out here for the printing part, and we were getting it printed out of Bombay. So that went to Germany and all that. So, I mean, the reason I'm touching about this is that what kind of process was involved that time publishing. Yesterday we were talking about self-publishing and all that stuff. But this is how a big publisher used to work. So anyway, going through that, so let me just start with these images and I'll just talk in the background instead of you looking at my face. I started this morning because I don't have any of this scanned, so otherwise.
What time did you wake up?
No, it wasn't. Actually, it wasn't very early morning. I just kind of made it little, I go Photoshop. This is actually going. This was before I went to bed, actually. There are all these gatefolds and stuff like that. Because that time photography books, of course, people like Ravi and Raghuram, there were a couple of people who were doing some brilliant books, but this was much removed from that. This was more of a collaboration with a writer and a photographer. And there weren't many books, at least at this format. It was a 12 by 14 with these large 4 feet tall long gatefolds in there. Sorry about the contrast, it's just the light was. And then obviously I started shooting fashion because I had never ever done any fashion whatsoever. I'd assisted a lot of photographers. So I arrived into the agencies in early 90s. If you came from America, that means, as a photographer, that means you did fashion, that's what it meant. And obviously I didn't know much about it, but it was okay. So I started doing a lot of this advertising stuff, and because I went to NID and I had serious interest in textiles, so I collaborated with the textile designer, or more like fashion designer, you would call her, Vipul Kumar. Now this is something which I really would like to emphasize. I mean, this is long back, she's a dear friend of mine, it's nothing to do with that. But it's important that when you work on a publishing project, there are two issues. Either you're getting loads of money that you don't have to work ever again, or otherwise you need to make sure that your name is rightly projected or whatever, it's put in the right place. Unfortunately, as you can see, my name is not really there. So all I'm saying is that just keep that in mind when you guys work on projects, because when you're starting off, you're hungry, you're desperate, and you want something, whatever it is. But just think it through, because you obviously will work very hard on these projects. It's not something you're just walking through. So, but I'm just showing you some stuff which was done on that. It was more lifestyle and all the royalty, and now they're all aging movie stars, so that's how old I am. And all these setup kind of stuff and all that formal portraiture. Now I want to talk to you about one of the biggest projects, at least in my career, was I started this in '92, and this was actually, I was working on it, and then my brother Vijay, he's a filmmaker, so he was back from film school from NYU, and he works as a writer, so we decided to collaborate on this project, where we ended up documenting the disappearing India. And I'll just keep going down the pictures so you can see the kind of people one worked on. So that's the cover. By the way, this was self-publishing because no publisher wanted to go with it, and when I went to the distributor, they said the problem in distribution business, this is about 8-10 years back, they would say that they would get a call from a hotel or from any shops from Khan Market or whatever, and they would say that, okay, हमको 4 Jaipur की किताब दे देना, 4 Agra की दे देना, 4 Delhi की दे देना. So it was somehow just not, and I wasn't the big star anyway, I'm not part of that thing, so I couldn't go and push it myself. So this was a book where we spent 8 years, and I photographed 400 people all over the country. These were all environmental portraits, black and white, and as Swapan said, you got to make sure that black line is all around, so it was all there. So there's nothing cropped, which we want to believe in as a purist. So we're talking about this disappearing culture. So these are some of the examples. So this is the last Chinese newspaper, which I think now is folded up in Calcutta. This is talking about Ravi Shankar. I'm really sorry about this contrast. I actually just copied from the book, so it's kind of died down in the mid-range. Ravi Shankar is a very good example. Ravi Shankar, as we all know, is such a big musician, what he's done and all that. But I tried to create this environment where you are shooting people in a certain space. This is Captain Lakshmi, which we shot where Subhash Chandra Bose actually originated his first army. You can't read it on that because this really, maybe I should have my glasses on or something. you can't read it, but what it has is on those panels you have the Azad tent house, and it's just written Azad all over, and it's such an irony because now those names are just left to these for businesses basically. What it meant earlier was something else. Even the movie stars, like this gentleman, as we all know him, as he holds the world record in playing single character as a cop, or spending time with Kushwant Singh. I also would like to talk to about what is environmental portrait. I mean, we usually think environmental portrait is that you go into somebody's space, and if he's a butcher, you gotta have all these dead animals around it or whatever. It's not about that. Honestly, I think it's not about like Arlen Newman. I think he was talking about that when you work on a environmental portrait, you need to be part of that person's process. You need to be part of what that person is all about. Kushwant Singh this is a perfect example of it. I could have shot him on the couch or sitting on his bed or whatever. This is, of course, a shot about 15, 18 years back. Now he's mostly in bed, but this is how he would sit, and he'd keep rocking that little mura, as he would keep writing. And but it took me a while because I wanted to shoot him in a certain way, and it's many times very tough because people don't want you to hang out or stick around. So this is something which I really believe is that when we talk about his what's his name, the painter. Sanyal, yeah, that's right. So it's again spending time with him at his house.
Excuse me, can you increase the mic volume a little bit?
Oh, sorry, I got to go a little short. There you go. Are you okay now? Okay, sorry. This is, anyway, I'm just going to show you the pictures and the way we structured this whole project was, there was a picture on one side and there was a text on the other side, which were interviews which I had edited. And in the end, they were biographies. So out of 400, we printed about 130 odd pictures, and we made a show out of it, which was about 700 kilos. And it traveled here in India, and then it traveled all the way far east to New Zealand, Middle East, and Europe, and all that. So it did a lot of running around. I was very particular about how I wanted my prints. So that time in the 90s, the most popular thing was iris prints, as some of us know. So I actually went to New York, and one of those stupidly expensive labs, I blew my bank on it, and we basically made a whole show out from this. So I still have the prints. Amrita Preetham in her study. That's, of course, I think some of us would know. After I finished the interview, he said, my daughter is a movie star, Rekha. I said, yes, you do. This is again looking at issues like, obviously, the riots in Delhi, post Mrs. Gandhi's assassination. This is talk about 2-minute portrait on a handheld Hasselblad. This was precisely 2 minutes. He was rehearsing some show, Alec Padanti. So he basically said, you come in, can you do this? I give you exactly 2 minutes. And 2 minutes we were out of there. I think I got 6 frames on him. Fortunately, this one worked. He didn't, right? That's it, right? Also, we're looking at, the nomadic community in India. So, the way the research was done, it was basically divided into 3 different issues, what old age is all about. India has become more and more what, maybe 10 years and 20 years back wasn't so much. It's how aging population is not cover of magazine anymore because it's young population, the marketing, the corporates, the entire ball game of consumption is just so focused on youth now. We were trying to highlight these different issues which aging or an aging population have because we don't have social security in our country. So and the only thing which survived or has been is our social setup, our family structure and all that stuff, and how that is changing. People migrating to the cities and stuff like that. So there were 3 issues which with the writer, I figured out that one was obviously, your health. That's one main security. Being healthy was important. Second was having some kind of financial base, so you're not on the road. But the third most critical part was your emotional security. And if you look at this picture, this grandmother has nothing really. But she's the happiest person on the planet because she's got her whole family, grandkids, everybody's there. They all sleep in that tent in there, and no complaints whatsoever. Or this gentleman in Bombay we met, they live in such a small little house, and this the older person in the center, he's Mr. Clock Collector, so his whole house is full of clocks. So, I mean, there's not enough room to sleep, but everybody's got, they've just got so many. I mean, you see his grandkid is smaller than that clock in the front. Or this lady we met in Bangalore, between Bangalore and Mysore, which I think some of us would know here. She got married and she couldn't have kids, and she was, of course, an outcast in the village, so the poor lady was living outside, and she decided that since I can't have kids, I'm going to start planting trees. And illiterate, she couldn't count those trees, and she's created this jungle out there on the highway. Today environment is a very hot issue, but here is somebody who just did it for a very different reason. This gentleman is from a Jamidar family in Calcutta. At one point of time, the Calcutta, all the bunch of villages were under his family. So basically, they own Calcutta in a technical way. Or our first radio jockey, Amin Sayani. So that brought me to, meanwhile, going back to commercial work. I would go and do these hotels and lifestyle photography and all that stuff. And I realized that they all look the same. So I started working with space. And in '97, I started this project up, which is basically environmental portrait of television. How television is taking over our lives. Because when I came in the early '90s, TV was just starting off. There weren't many channels then. But you'll get an idea. Wow, this contrast. I'm sorry about this contrast. These images are really gone off. So this show has been shown. It's been to a few places. It's been through some galleries here and in the West and in the Far East actually.
Dinesh, we can't adjust the contrast.
Yeah.
Just do it now.
This is a festival, so that's why we allow all kinds of sounds.
Television out there. Some of this work did go to the Venice Biennale earlier this year, I think April or something. Okay, this brings me to how do you do your assignments in terms of, again, I'm talking to photographers who are very new to the profession. I would go to magazines, let's say in Delhi, I went to First City magazine, and I said, I can do lots of free shoots for you. Of course, it was filmed that time. I can do your covers and stories, but in exchange, I told the editor, if I can get maybe 4 or 8 pages to do, my little story in there. So it just disciplines you, as you know, that, we are, by and large, photographers are quite lazy, I think, at least I am. So it kind of helps you that you have a deadline which is self-created, self-commissioned, and self-paid. So I started working on these various things. Every month I would do this. I was again working on this disappearing cultures. So let's say starting with photography, how it used to be. These cameras, unfortunately, I think probably they're all gone now, right? Yeah, they're all gone. Oh yeah, that's right. Oh yeah. Yeah, to threaten people. So just working in different studios and all around the city. It's a huge body of work. I'll just show you a couple of them. Then also there was a certain reaction to what I was working in this formal setup of fashion photography, and I wanted to take the same treatment to the world outside, which meant the way I would like, the way I would create. And here are, these are all done mid-90s onwards. So here you go. So this is like, there's this guy I found who was like Amitabh Bachchan look-alike. So we went and set it up outside some cinema hall at Nehru Place. Again, the contrast is way, way too much, and the colors are really off because I've just copied from the magazine. They are not original scans. And these were all shot on film, by the way, on 120. But even, it's not just about fashion. I mean, there are also how traditionally people would dress. They were driven more by what they were coming from. Also, one needs to understand, if you look at some of the, let's say, I just want to show you, like, let's say originally this kind of, or this guy Amitabh thing. Fashion had a very clear divide. You at least in the early 90s or 18, 20 years back, you didn't have fashion designers doing stuff for mainstream Bollywood cinema, and people were following Mithun Chakrabarti or whoever the actress who were popular at that time. Today, that I think the biggest change today is the Berlin Wall has come off, and it's all merged. Everything, television, popular culture, everything is in one place now. So for me at that point of time, it was very interesting to see that how people were behaving or dressing up in a certain sense. This is my current project. I mean, still I'm at it. This is about, I think, by this time I was really tired of advertising and I just couldn't deal with it anymore because I was just having a very difficult time in trying to, figure out the reasons why I was doing. And of course, financial was a very key reason because it was driving all my other stuff. But this is something which I went into, and I was working a lot of stuff on disease and all kinds of different issues. I teach photography, which also it took me to many parts of the world. This Fanning is a small little village in Upper Assam, which is next to Arunachal actually. Some of you guys have seen this exhibition. It was up about 3 years back at Religare. When I worked on this project, I spent, I think, first 3 years just going to this village. Now this village is part of a dying community. There are about 1,500 of them left now. They are originally from Burma, but they are, this one specific village is of about 147 people. My idea was really to get involved at a level where I was more about capacity building. So I got involved in setting up a small ecotourism lodge, which is owned and run by the tribe, by the Fanning village. They're called Thaipakis, that's the tribe. And they're cut off, from the rest of the world. There's a river between them and the rest of the world. I also got into education programs, so I started sending kids to school. I helped set up, there was a half-built monastery, so I finished that, so that has added income to the village. And then there were, I do a lot of travel, so I thought let me try to do my little bit of offset my carbon footprint. So we started doing this tree plantation every monsoon, plant about 100 odd trees. Of course, we plant them and some of them get destroyed because they're all elephant paths in that region. So that has been a little tricky. The reason I was there also was when I talk about conflict issue, what my interest about conflict is not the obvious going to the big, what photojournalists do, and it's not about war, but it's a different kind of war. This is about how this whole urbanization and consumption culture which we all live in, or are trying to get to more and more of it, how communities who are losing their, how they're getting marginalized in terms of losing their land rights, their water rights. And it's not about just this community because they represent stuff even in the city for that matter, how lives are changing. So what I wanted to do was, I didn't arrive with, with my, these are all, by the way, all 4x5, good old film and all that stuff. There's no electricity, so we, I have a little hut there, so we set up the studio there. And I go back 6, 7 weeks, every 6, 7, 8 weeks I'm back to that village. And I started to do my photography workshop with the kids, and then we started taking pictures and all that stuff. But there was no end game or end goal that I'm gonna do some exhibition or a book or whatever out of it. But it was really being part of the process, and I think that really helped me kind of figure out that what I didn't want in life, and I kind of figured out that how much I had, I had certain kind of dislike for corporates and agency business, because it reminded me of during doing advertising work, during the award times, they would, the creative director I'll be working with, they fill up all the, you've done below the line, you've done the campaign, you've done blah, blah. Now we need to just fill up this social issue. Can you come and shoot or think of a concept so we can run for this award too? And that, I mean, hypocrisy runs across, I think, especially in this part of the world, we have a huge bit of it, but I just found it very difficult to do something which is, I so dearly love, and I somehow couldn't deal with it. And I think that was one very key reason. Funding really helped me in kind of shifting myself away from that whole business of advertising work, because for people, it's for different people, it's different reasons what you do, and I couldn't be into it anymore. And so I'll just go through the images. These are now here the contrast really pumped up, but now the reason I was in that place was because there are coal mines in that area, and this whole work was presented here. It's been to Washington DC, to another gallery there. The whole idea about this darkness was not about let's shoot it on black, but it was more about that how these coal mines were slowly eating their way of life, and how illegal migration from Bangladesh, from Nepal, and other Hindi-speaking areas of the rest of the country, how they were basically coming and just pushing them out of the entire vote bank and the regular politics which most of the country suffers from. So even the show which I did, we created this massive space. We made it into a coal mine, and there were these, these prints are taller than me. They were really huge images. I'll show you a small film after this, which will give you an idea that how you actually curate or design a show. I mean, I was so involved that even the graphic designer, I brought him all the way to that village. Fortunately, he didn't get dengue there, but we went through that whole process. The exhibition designer came there, and we actually kind of figured out how we're going to treat this whole project when we actually take it out there. And as I said, I think those first 2-3 years, I didn't have any camera of mine with me. And finally, I arrived with my 4x5 and generator, and I lost lots of lights because they keep blowing up. So, but it was all part of the village thing. So I photographed the entire village of 147. And the best part was, and which I find it very important, and I'll touch upon that later on, the first show was in the village. That's where we started the show. And then it came to Delhi and went to some other places. I'm also in the process of reviving textile there, because a lot of these homes have looms there which have been obviously not much of use because of cheap fabric coming from China and India and Bangladesh and all that. You can see some of the fabric, what he has as the headgear, that's all woven within the village. Also, the strange thing was that they were not really used to a camera before, and when I finally arrived with a 4x5, which was obviously this big huge bellows and fabric and all that stuff, so and that was the first time I came with a stove also. I took one softbox, and they were, most amazing thing is all the films I processed, there's not a single place where anybody blinked. I mean, everybody was brilliant. Yeah. This road where this funding villages is Upper Assam. It's called Stilwell Road, which was built during World War II. And I actually managed to go to China from Kunming. I actually did a 2.5-3 week journey all the way coming down southwest China into Burma. And then we got sent back, and then I tried it again. So I think on my third attempt, I managed to come into Assam. So I basically did this entire journey. So I shot thousands of slides, but that was more as a documentary for myself. This is the youngest person in the village, and there are no kids after this. And the reason, I mean, you wonder why, I think it's a lot to do with, I mean, I'm not an anthropologist, but I think it's a combination of, the marriages happening in other communities, and there might be some environmental issues too. Because, typically you go to Indian villages, or at least the cow belt in this part of the country, you just see so many kids everywhere, but strangely this village doesn't have so many children. So this is just before our exhibition opening. I've never had a 6 a.m. opening, but we had to because we had to go to the fields. I took my diary and we made a small little catalog out of it. The fabric you see in the red, on the left side, that's all woven by that lady, So he's the youngest one now, he's quite grown up. So yeah, that's really it. So I'll just show you a film. This is an unedited thing, but you can...
ऊपर में देखा क्या होगा हम लोग का बस्ती
She's a school teacher, so she could speak very good Hindi. What I'll do before the lights go on, let me just show you. This is how you make a prototype of the show, which I did on my kitchen counter. That's my rescue cat and the dog. Now, a show like this is relegated in Connaught Place, which some of my friends here, they've been to that exhibition. It took us 3 days to set the show up, so I couldn't do a time lapse. So I actually did it while bringing down the show, and then we just reversed the film, so it looked like we put it in one go.
The cricket added to the atmosphere in the exhibition?
Yeah, no, good question. Actually, the reason that cricket was because there's no electricity in that village, and I wanted to have a sound, some kind of a soundscape. So I recorded the night sounds of the village, and that plays in the gallery. I'm talking about details such as that at the launch in the gallery, I had 2 other people from the village bring their local product, and they created a starter so people could taste what their food tasted like. So you try to connect people differently, in as many ways as you can. You had the introduction, and then you go into this really pitch darkness. For the video, I had to pump up the light a little bit because otherwise you're going to run into black walls, But you get that sense of how these images are. And it wasn't like just pasted on the wall, but there were passages. You had to walk through these fabric which was stretched all around, and would give you that feeling of that you're surrounded by these people in total darkness. And it's really recreating that coal mine experience. To give you a scale of, as people are there to showcase what's the size of these images. One thing I didn't want to do is, which is very typical one, I mean, a lot of times people do, and I have friends in the West who go to, obscure places. This is very obscure for this part of the world too. And you can do these exotic images because you have all the photography skills and all the thought process and all that. I think it's important to demystify it also. So I actually ran a little video in there, which was a little film I did, which you can see there, which just has the community's way of life, their festivals, and just a regular day. I also created the show in such a way that when you got in, I released only one picture in the press because I didn't want people to know what it was. And when you walked in, you went straight to the gallery. And if you wanted to socialize, then you could go to the left, otherwise you go straight to the right side. There's no wine or anything given to you. And then you walk through the entire process, and then you basically come out from the other side. So it's just an experience, you go through it. So there it is. You can have lights, please.
Before picking up your camera, to how you compose the image, to finally how you edit it out, what you find as a successful environment to work with?
I'll give you a larger answer to, because I think there's an entire process involved. What I can't deal personally is this, this parachute dropping photography, where, I'll call up my man in Bastar, and I'll tell him that, listen, I'm coming on this train, and I need you to sort out all these people. I arrive on the train, he picks me up 2 in the morning, 6 a.m. at sunrise at somebody's house. I've got, those things are brilliant, those are needed for, photojournalists, because, they need to be parachute dropped every time because they've got deadlines, they've got the editors on their head, and their business demands that. But I personally felt that, for me, if I needed to really work on my projects, it's not about what the end product is. I mean, this project has been done for so many years. I've had editors. I was at Frankfurt Book Fair 2 years back. But, I don't think I want to make it into a book at this stage because it was never about the end product. And going back to your question about how you edit and all that, I think if you have a larger connection to your concept or your subject or whatever you're working on, you kind of see a lot of things there. I mean, if you look at these people, it took a lot of time for them to trust me, believe in me. Like, who's a stranger? Why is he here? And why is he putting this, his time and resources or whatever in trying to build all this stuff? So it was like a building block. It took a while, and once I was part of their furniture or part of their space or whatever, then we brought our camera. I started working, and I didn't go with any assistant, any of this stuff. I was just doing it on my own. I trained local boys there. They became my, focusing guy and where to hold the flash and all that stuff. But I think when you come to this business of what I want to edit, what I want to keep, what I want to take out, I think if you have a connection with what you're doing, it will automatically happen because there's a larger reason to it. And because if you start looking at, going back to the earlier point, looking at that, oh, I want to finish this as a book or this large mega show. I didn't even have a clue about what I was going to do there. Years went by, and then I was, I thought, let's start off, because I was playing with the kids. We used to do these small, pictures on the laptop, and, with this little camera, we do these funny photographs and all that stuff. And we go take all that, and we go to, we go down to Margarita, or, one of these small towns where there's electricity, and we print these images. So it started off that way. So I think if you're connected with your subject, everything is it's least of your issues.
I'll actually go back to, say, the previous series and compare 2 images. One is of Padamsee and the other is of Khushwant Singh.
Right.
You said you hung out with Khushwant for a while before you got the image that you were looking for.
Right.
Vis-a-vis the other one where you spent exactly 2 minutes and you got your 6 frames. Do you think the result was satisfactory in both cases for you?
Not really. I mean, I think I would have liked to spend more time with Alex. I've worked with, I know him and all that stuff, but I think there's always more there. And I think as photographers, we always go back for more. Sometimes you get stonewalled, so you can't do anything about it. But yeah, like Khushwant Singh is a very good example. Or most of the people I've worked with, I went to some very obscure printer. He's a block printer in Gujarat, in the middle of somewhere further down Burj or something, and this man I went and met, and he had all the time in the world for you. So he slept at his place. We made 2 pictures. We showed some Polaroids, and then I came back, and then I made prints. Then I went to see him again because I thought we can do so much more. So I think as a photographer, we would love to have that. If we can give, and also, going to another point is that what happens is, which I have actually a very, very big problem with, and these are some of the big stars out of the West. I've assisted, people like Mary Ellen Mark and all that. I've worked as a student with these photographers. And I have a very big problem is that a lot of them have built their careers on photography from this part of the world. But the issue is that other than some group show arriving once in a while, how many times do we see that work out here? Hardly, And I really, honestly, I have a huge problem with that because we have the skill sets, we have the gear, or we probably have the money, we can get anywhere, but then just imagine you have all that, and that guy says, listen, I'm not interested in getting photographed. I turn the entire thing upside down for you. But what are you connecting back is really critical, I really have a huge issue with that because it's very easy for, and I'm not talking about photojournalism, that's a very different ballgame because that requires very different thinking and it's a very, very hard job. But I think it's important, like even the show I had first was in Funning. I've had a lot of these shows in many parts of the world, but I don't care. Ultimately it matters. Let's start the first step from where you started. And it doesn't have to be exhibition, it doesn't have to be a book. It can be a print given back to that community or that person you photograph. And a lot of people do that, out here and otherwise too. But I think it's the right thing to do. I think it's important,
Question specific to three portraits. Again, you can loosely call them environmental portraits. Shot on the streets of Delhi with the backdrop put up in the middle of the street or in the middle of the it is a little tricky, but not meant to run anybody down or up. How do you deal with this? Because it's we talk about which came first, chicken and egg. There's a backdrop in life going on around you.
Right.
Right? Now when you come to the Delhi Photo Festival, you see this mega show right in the middle of Delhi
Right.
Photo Festival, which is again backdrop with light going around it.
Right.
There have been so many examples in photography. How do we deal with these issues? Because they always keep coming up. Your work obviously happened before that work. Did it kind of cross your mind when you saw those images that
No, I know what
it
you're.
happened to me early in my life.
Sure.
I could have shot something, never seen Salgado's work, and said, "Oh, this is too Salgado-esque."
Right.
Now someone would see this. Obviously this was shown before.
Right.
And then, I would hate to imagine someone did this to Raghunaresh at this point they can't because, your images were there before. So, how do we deal with these issues? Because these influences are.
Can I add to it?
Let him finish.
I have seen a couple of images with backdrops. When Britishers,
No, I said that.
Yeah, that's what
Plus
you
other
just said,
examples. Plus other examples.
Yeah.
when they went to shoot Ungis in Andaman and Nicobar Islands, they used to have these backdrops with checks. So it's all.
No, my point was backdrops, yes. Backdrops with normal life going on around it. Specific to that, yes. Specific to that is what my.
That's what I.
So there also there was but there are many more examples of that. But I said, how do we deal with somewhere the line that is more and that was there afterwards?
My point is that there is always a reoccurrence. It happened 100%.
Maybe.
Let Samar answer.
Yeah, no, actually, Swapn, what you're talking about, I think everything is photographed, It's just what take you have on it. And I'm not the first one and or the last one or whatever. And I think it does throw you off because, as a creative person, whether we admit it or not, I think it's the most insecure profession you can be in. You want to own up and you want to say I was the one or whatever it is. And, I think, Raghu, of course, I've always looked at his work since I was a kid. But I think looking at the larger issue, I think if you have a certain purpose or certain thought process in your head, rest is really secondary, isn't it? Don't you think? What skill set we apply, what setting we do, I think that just becomes, and you know that because you've been doing this, and you've been doing, especially for a person like you who has done so much of documentary work, and then you go into advertising where they want you to do that, and forget that. It's happened with me.
It's the only documentary work I ever did. That's the label I got.
From me, yeah. It's like, I think Steve McCurry had done that shot for on Rajasthan where, you know, the trains are pulling up and they're just running on the tracks, and this guy has got, you know, with his surfer, has got this cup of tea going on. And I worked with Mariel and Mark with BBDO, and we were shooting in Jaisalmer, and they put two Heineken beers on that, you know. So whose shot is that, right? So of course, it's always gonna be.
My thing was that, you know, somewhere the limelight is more, you know, and that work may have come later, and it just get recognized for, you know, being what it is and spoken about. And yeah, it's just something.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have it as a purpose of that. I wanted to put it on canvas. I think for me, the larger reason was that what I was looking at was that how formal fashion photography was so away from the rest of the reality. Today it is very different, as we all know what has happened with popular culture, television, all that stuff. So I was trying to shift that entire setup. So it wasn't like, okay, let's put canvas and throw a lot of film boxes and shoot it. But there was a larger issue that, okay, we're going to light them. You know, when we go to a celebrity, we shoot some big star or whatever it is, we treat them with certain respect, certain, you know, suck up or whatever it is. But when you're working on somebody who is not from that level, do we treat that person the same way, or do we have a different thinking, you know? So, not that, you know, I mean, in this specific project, I really wanted to treat those subjects in a certain way, the way I would do a fashion spread, for example. I mean, I remember that Elle magazine started whenever 1500 years back or whatever, and the first issue I worked on, I got all these stories, we did all this canvas stuff and all that, and that's when, you know, I was shifting into this, that, okay, let me go to the streets, and, you know, I've got lots of them. I mean, I didn't want to do a whole slideshow out of it.
But is that, sorry, because the extension of what you just said, did that canvas follow you later also? Because I saw it in the series of the portraits that you did. The canvas was just probably in the gallery there. And,
Yeah.
you know, in a way, because
Right.
it was still a formalized portrait, and, you know, you know, you made everything black and kind of just extended it beyond just the frame, which was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that canvas on those series is quite old now, so I've had it.
The last one.
I think the same question was in my mind when we started with the backdrop and because that used to be also the street photography.
That's right.
There were no
Exactly.
cameras around, and everyone would peek into it
That's right.
and they would put something. So I remember my aunt and uncle, they got married and they sat in front of that
That's right.
backdrop, and you have taken some here,
That's right.
and of course it is with film. And then now when I enter this exhibit, I mean, it is now huge pictures which Mr. Raghurai has very nicely done. I enjoyed them very much. But because of the technology, the size and the flare and all has come up much more than maybe that film. But then idea interesting.
Yeah, and see, ideas are nobody's. That's
So
very good.
he stolen my thoughts and he also
I know we're really short of time, and I don't want to abuse this sort of Q&A privilege in this forum, so may I very selfishly request 5 minutes of your time after this?
Yeah,
Everybody else?
The other steps, etc.
Thank you.
Talking about thought processes, I just want to know what was your thought behind shooting only portraits in the time?
You know, I actually have series of many different things. I've done films also. I've done their festivals. I've done some, you know, because we built this entire ecotourism lodge where we set up there are 4 bathrooms with, you know, solar panels on top, and they are, you know, it's you can't go in the mountains because they're cut off. So I've done a lot of other work, but this was a certain body of work I wanted to showcase. And as you could see the design of it and all that, there was a certain thought I had that how you want to portray about this community which is disappearing. And, you know, I always say that it is not about some obscure village in the middle of nowhere. What they do is these 147 actually represent the 1500, and the 1500 represent thousands and millions across the planet, you know. So this was my take really, and as I said, I'm not an anthropologist, so I did my bits and pieces in there, you know.
When I saw your portraits, especially the ones in street portraits, coming back to what they said, it did seem like you were also, I mean, I guess all of us are, like you said, seeing Raghurai pictures here, in some sort of conversation with older photographers that have shot India. So it kind of, you know, simultaneously comes out in everyone's work. But I mean, I don't see why that should make a difference. Because
Yeah, and I think what
as long as you're satisfied with what the final output is, like what's the difference?
that's
I mean, I think we're all in conversation. I'm sure like Raghuram was also in conversation with older photographers that have shot many parts of the world, you know.
exactly. Yes. Sorry.
Penang. Now we saw the community and they're laughing and talking.
So, I mean,
The
once
exhibition.
we need a mic, I just thought that it was too crowded, so I didn't want to put a mic around.
I'll speak louder.
Yeah, you can stand, please.
Yeah, no. In Penang, we saw that you know the exhibition and people were laughing and talking, and then we had these incredibly profound, serious images. Now I can understand old people, you know. I mean, you put them in a cave, a coal mine that you built. But I was trying to figure out with the middle age and the younger, what's your process? How did you get them to become this element of stillness that you got there? What, did you just bore them to death in there? Did you say, no,
I can be very boring
smiling?
character at times.
What did you do? How did you get there?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'll tell you a few things which was, I mean, I kept shooting, kept showing them stuff on my laptop, which was this 35mm stuff and, you know, digital things. Then when I arrived with this big thing, so there was a big ceremony we had, and I showed them that what this camera, they couldn't believe it. You know, some of them had, in fact, one of the old gentlemen in there, he's no more, unfortunately. He built the Silwell Road, so he worked with the, you know, the British engineers and American servicemen, whatever, 70 years, 65 years back. I think what worked was, for me, was that it gets very difficult to keep yourself out of that picture. Because, you know, we have, it's just not about framing, but there are a lot of things you are, actually it's you, whatever that photograph is. And I really worked very, you know, consciously on that front, that I will make sure that I don't have any, you know, smile or cry or whatever it is, just be whatever you are. And it was quite shocking, I tell you, and because we are all photographers here, you understand the value of it. I was, of course, shooting all 4.5, you know, humidity as hell out there, you couldn't carry your film, too many of them and all that. I'll bring it back, I'll process it out here. So I would shoot only 2 sheets. And because I was going back so much, so it was like, didn't matter, you know, I could always reshoot it. So I would carry 2 films, 2 sheets loaded up, and we never needed, you know, any loading boxes or whatever, because it was so pitch dark at night time. You could just turn your films under a blanket or whatever. So first lot I shot, I think about 8 people. And I brought that after about 10 days back to Delhi. I processed it. I held the other part. And all the 8 came out normal. No blinking, no nothing. And believe you me, I have no idea why it happened. But 147 unprocessed films still sit in my fridge. And other 147 are perfect. There's nothing went wrong. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's any answer to that.
I think the answer to that really that they normally shoot people who are not used to being in front of the camera. They don't blink, they just, because they don't have a preconceived notion of what they look like, should turn their hair, should look prettier.
Yeah, but
that's
that
what
was...
I've seen shooting out in the streets,
Right.
areas where the cameras not being.
That's right. I mean, I did introduce them to digital stuff, so they used to always laugh, and I used to film that because, you know, they would sit on the computer and then we all have laugh at dinner time, you know, and how they were looking, who was looking more pretty or whatever. But I think, for me, I think most important thing was, and I really feel that, you know, it's, you know, when they start trusting you, it's a very different issue, you know, it's leap of faith, you know, you feel like, okay, this person is here for not just to make something out of it, but, you know, and it's very easy, believe me, I mean, we all know that, you know, this whole, you know, that famous book, I can't remember the author, but, you know, it's some Western author is running in Africa or South America, and he's screaming around, and he's like, anybody raped and speaks English, you know? I mean, such an irony to it, you know. So I think it's really critical that, you know, you connect to your subject to a level where you do become that part of their daily lives, which I can never be. I don't speak the language. There are 2 people who speak Hindi, and the rest of them, they just laugh with me, and I laugh with them, you know, and there's nothing else to it, you know.
No, please.
I haven't shown you the process.
I'm an amateur.
I didn't know this.
I'll put it very shortly. I think it's like even today you take music, talking any art. Somehow one has gone through ages with some time, of course various times. But a time comes when you get so tired of that, then you want to go back. I remember when I used to listen to film music, my uncle and aunts what CDs you were listening to all the time. And today, they are the ones who are going and buying those 70s, 60s, 80s film music. Because you see, a time comes when all this, you feel like going back, because it's a change. So it becomes a cycle. So today when you have this very, very jumpy kind of music, you, after a while you do this.
Yeah, you want to go back, sure, yeah.
So maybe it's the same in photography. I mean, you did this ages ago, and Mr. Adurai had done it today.
Yeah.
And of course he had good technology in his hand to do it. You did it with a very hard way. And very well done, I must say.
Thank you.
Just two more questions, please, then we need to move on.
Human face portrait, what you call it.
Just speak louder so they can.
Louder?
Yes.
More louder and the loudest one. The human face is the most common, commonly we cell phone, cameras, we all the time we film. I want to know your, why do you film human face portrait? Your version, what you like about it.
No, I don't think I'm really limited to, I mean, you look at those television portraits, see, that's also a portraiture, it's about the environment where people live. People say, oh, why do you have, nobody there? But, it's again, looking at, human life, basically. It can be face, it can be space, it can be way of life. So, I mean, my work has been many, like I give you an example of the Bhopal project which I did, which has been from India Art Summit, went to Kalagoda, and went to Art Chennai. It's a 20-foot container created in like a railway dabba, basically, a compartment. And that night when the trains were pulling in, people were choking in their sleep, and they had no idea what was going on. I went to Bhopal, of course, Pablo can tell you, he was there day one, I went 20, 25 years later. But I basically created images which were within the plant. They weren't about the life outside, which has been affected now in the third generation. And I photographed the space where the control room was, where the machinery was, where the storage was. And I had these rectangular prints, done on light boxes. And there were 5 windows. So when you went into this dark box, you felt like you were inside that train journey. In fact, the box was at an angle. So you know how the train moves and you kind of move in further down. So you walk through these windows and you have these backlit images. And there was a sound piece with that. Now again, you don't have to, I mean, there are many ways to show Bhopal, and there's some really brilliant work has been done. But my take was that, I can still touch people's brains, their minds, with treating it in my way, that is,